Got more cool than any 10 actors I've ever seen.
Yes, and speaking of cool.
He's got more cool in his little finger than most men can muster in a lifetime. At 95, Clint Eastwood still carries himself like a gunslinger stepping out of a desert haze. Lean frame, weathered face, that squint carved deeper with time but sharp enough to cut a man in half. He sits back in the chair, casual, shoulders loose but presence commanding, the kind of aura that makes a whole room hush without a word being spoken. The lights are low, cameras rolling, and the air has that charged silence that only Clint can summon. The interviewer, younger by decades but clearly awed, leans forward, fumbling a smile. "Clint," he begins carefully, "you've been the outlaw, the cowboy, the cop, the soldier, the man no one could touch. But off-screen, tell me, were there women who ever tempted you, who nearly broke through that wall of yours?" Clint doesn't answer right away. He never does. That's part of the Eastwood playbook. Let silence stretch until it becomes its own dialogue. His squint narrows a fraction, lips tugging into a half-smile, the kind that suggests he's already holding the cards and just deciding when to lay them down. He chuckles low, a dry rasp that sounds like gravel under boots. "Well," he says, voice a slow rumble, "at this age, what the hell do I got to lose? I've made a lot of movies, stood beside a lot of beautiful women. Truth is, some of them damn near made me forget I was supposed to be acting." He pauses again, savoring the tension in the room. "And some I never got the chance with, but I sure as hell thought about it. Let's just say there were 7 women in my life who could have made me drop every line I ever memorized. And believe me, standing 5 feet from some of them, that was tougher than any stunt I ever pulled." He leans forward, elbows heavy on his knees, that old cowboy glint flickering in his eyes. People think jumping off trains, getting dragged by horses, or pointing a .44 Magnum was the hard part. Hell, that was the easy stuff. The real test of grit? That was looking into the eyes of some of these women and remembering I was supposed to be the tough guy. You can fake a fistfight. You can't fake the way your heart starts hammering when the most beautiful woman in the world looks straight through you. That ain't acting. That's survival. He lets the words hang, then takes a slow sip of his drink, savoring it like he's savoring the memory. "The first," Clint says, leaning back again as though bracing himself against a flood. "Meryl Streep. Now that woman, she was dynamite. Trouble wrapped in grace. When we shot the bridges of Madison County, people swore they could feel the heat radiating off the screen. Truth is, the camera only caught half of it. The other half? That lived between takes, in the glances no one wrote into the script. I'd be standing there trying to play the stoic photographer, and she'd look at me with those eyes, soft but sharp, like she knew every secret I ever tried to bury, and I'd forget my damn lines. That doesn't happen to me. But with Meryl, it did. More than once. She had this way of tilting her head, smiling just enough to make you think she knew something dangerous. And suddenly I wasn't Clint the actor, or Robert the character. I was just a man trying not to fall apart under her gaze." He laughs, shaking his head. "There's a moment in that farmhouse kitchen where I lift her chin. People still ask if that was acting. Let me tell you straight, it wasn't. That was me trying not to kiss her for real with 100 crew members watching. And if those lights had gone dark, if it had just been her and me in that kitchen, hell, I don't think we'd have finished the scene." His voice drops lower, softer, like sharing something he shouldn't. "She had this scent. Nothing perfumed. Just her. Warm, faint, dangerous. I'd catch it and think, if I breathe too deep, I'll never come back." Meryl wasn't just a co-star. She was a storm. Gentle one second, ferocious the next. For those few months, she didn't just play Francesca. She lived in me too. And I'll tell you, keeping my hands in my pockets around her, hardest stunt I ever pulled. He smirks, letting that confession sink, then shifts, a shadow passing over his expression. "Sandra Locke," he says, and the name itself feels like smoke curling out of an old fire. He exhales hard. "We worked together on 6 pictures. 6. That doesn't happen unless there's something burning hot, on screen and off. With Sandra, the fire was nearly uncontrollable. On camera, she could melt in your arms 1 minute and cut you to ribbons the next. She could stare me down without flinching, and believe me, that's rare. A lot of actresses can do tough, plenty can do vulnerable. Sandra could switch between the two in a heartbeat, and that kind of power. It messes with you. Because a man starts forgetting which part is the act. Working with her wasn't just acting, it was sparring. Half the time, I didn't know if we were in character or not, and sometimes I didn't care. The chemistry was that thick. Directors knew not to yell cut too fast because they were watching lightning in a bottle. His tone roughens, but fire burns. People saw the sparks. What they didn't see was the smoke, the fights, the aftermath, the scars. There were days we'd argue like hell behind the scenes, then walk out there and make it look like we were the only two souls alive. That's the thing about Sandra. She could make me furious, then 5 minutes later she'd make me forget my own name. I told myself to behave, to keep it professional. But the line snapped every damn time she walked on set. And I'll tell you the truth. I'd walk into that storm again, knowing it'd tear me apart. That's the kind of woman she was. Clint chuckles, the sound gravelly but fond. Shirley MacLaine. Now there's a firecracker. We made 2 mules for Sister Sarah together, and I'll never forget it. She was 5'0", but she packed more sass than most men could handle. Smart as hell, quick with a comeback, sharper than any blade. On screen, she played a nun who wasn't quite what she seemed. Off screen, same damn thing. 1 minute, she was all business, stone-faced serious. Next, she'd be laughing so hard the crew couldn't keep the cameras steady. And when she laughed, hell, it wasn't polite or dainty. It was raw, contagious, the kind of laugh that crawls under your skin and stays there. She kept me on my toes every damn day. Most women I worked with tried to keep up with me. Shirley made me keep up with her. He shakes his head, smiling. She had this habit of catching me off guard with some remark or look, and suddenly I was the one trying not to break. She was temptation in a whole different way. Not the slow burn storm like Meryl, not the fire and smoke like Sandra. Shirley was lightning. Sudden, sharp, impossible to ignore. She reminded me that sometimes the toughest act of all was letting yourself laugh when the world expects you to stay stone cold. The memories keep rolling. One by one, each co-star a ghost conjured from old reels and the lingering scent of film sets. He talks of others, their beauty, their danger, the way they carved marks on his soul no audience ever saw. Each story is a confession, half warning, half tribute. Always that balance. The tough guy fighting not with guns or fists, but with self-control, with desire, with the quiet war of being a man in the orbit of women who could unmake him with a glance. He pauses then, sipping slow, letting silence take root again. The squint sharpens, and when he speaks, it's softer, almost reverent. You can fake gunshots. You can fake a brawl, but you can't fake the way a woman gets inside your head, inside your chest, until you're not sure if you're acting anymore. And I'll tell you, some of those women, they tested me harder than any director, any stunt, any villain I ever faced on screen. He lets a grin crawl across his face, sly and dangerous. Hell, sometimes I failed that test. The room is quiet, the weight of his words hanging heavy, the kind of silence no one dares cut. Clint leans back, arms folded now, like a man closing a book he's not sure he should have opened. His voice drops to a whispery rumble. In the end, people think the toughest man in the room is the one holding the gun. Truth is, the toughest thing I ever did was behave myself around the women who could have undone me. And I'll admit it, sometimes I didn't. He smirks, that cowboy glint flashing, the squint narrowing like the final shot of a Western. And you know what? I don't regret a damn thing. Clint shifts in his chair, and there's that shadow again, half grin, half something heavier. He takes a long breath, eyes narrowing like he's looking back down a trail he almost forgot. Elizabeth Taylor, he says at last, voice rumbling low. Now that was royalty. Not just Hollywood royalty. Hell, she carried herself like she was carved out of marble. We never made a picture together, not in the way I wished, but we crossed paths more than once, and let me tell you, that woman had gravity. Step into a room with her, and you weren't just walking into a party, you were stepping into her orbit. And once you were there, good luck breaking free. Violet eyes, they called them. I used to think that was a trick of the cameras, but no. Stand 2 feet away, and you'd swear she could see through the bones in your chest. I was Clint Eastwood, the tough guy, the outlaw, but in her presence, I felt like a kid caught sneaking whiskey from his old man's cabinet. She had that power. She didn't even need to touch you. One glance was enough to remind you you were mortal. He chuckles. Softer this time. Almost sad. Some women are storms, some are fire. Elizabeth! She was a damn universe. Beautiful, endless, dangerous to navigate. I thank God I never got cast opposite her in some sweeping romance. Because I'm not sure I'd have survived it. He lets the thought trail, fingers drumming against his knee before his eyes light with a flicker of mischief. Then there was Raquel Welch. Now there's temptation wrapped in danger. I remember seeing her on set once, different picture, different crew, but the same effect. Every damn man in the room forgot what he was doing. She had that walk. You know the one, like the ground itself bent just to let her pass. With Raquel, the air changed. She could make silence feel louder than gunfire. I never worked with her in the way I did with Meryl or Sandra, but I'll admit it. More than once, I thought about what it would have been like, and thinking was dangerous enough, because she wasn't just beauty, she was defiance. That's the kind of combination that leaves scars. He leans forward now, elbows heavy on his thighs, as though settling in for another memory he can't quite let go of. Sally Field. Sweet, right? America's darling. That's what everyone thought. But let me tell you, underneath that smile, that charm, was a woman tougher than steel. We worked the same circles, and every time I saw her, I thought, this is a woman who doesn't break easy. On screen, she could melt hearts, but off screen, she could stare down anyone and hold her ground. And that's dangerous too, because a man like me, you get used to being the strong one, the steady one. Then along comes Sally with that grin, that spark, and suddenly you're the one trying to keep your balance. She made me laugh in ways I didn't expect. Not the polite chuckle kind, real laughter, the kind that makes you forget who the hell you're supposed to be for a minute. That's a temptation too, believe it or not. Sometimes laughter is deadlier than a kiss. Clint sits back again, sipping slow, eyes half-lidded with memory. The years seem to roll across his face like clouds over desert sky. Sophia Loren, he says at last, voice almost reverent. If you want to know what it's like to stand in front of a force of nature, that's it. Sophia didn't just walk onto a set, she claimed it. Dark eyes, voice like velvet over steel, and that presence. Lord, that presence. I worked with legends, but Sophia had something else. A gravity, like Elizabeth, but warmer, like fire instead of stone. Being near her was like standing too close to a bonfire on a cold night. You didn't want to step away, even if you knew you might get burned. And believe me, every man who ever stood near her thought about the fire. Me included. Some women test your strength with fights or arguments. Sophia tested mine with silence, with a smile, with a hand resting just long enough on your arm to make you forget the damn script. He smirks again, that cowboy glint flashing like the last flare before sunset. That's the truth about all of them. Meryl, Sandra, Shirley, Elizabeth, Raquel, Sally, Sophia. They weren't just co-stars or passing temptations. They were storms, fire, lightning, whole universes. And me? I was just a man trying to play tough enough not to get swept away. People think the hardest stunt of my career was hanging off a helicopter or running across rooftops with blanks firing all around me. Truth? The hardest stunt I ever pulled was keeping my composure when one of those women leaned just a little too close. And I'll say it one more time, slow so it sticks. Sometimes I didn't succeed. And if you ask me, I don't regret failing one damn bit.